Nintendo is arguably the biggest name in the game space right now, with Nintendo Switch on its way to being the best selling console of all time. And for us, with Switch 2 on the horizon, there's never been a better time to talk all things Nintendo, which brings us here to Final Weapon's second podcast, Switch Point. At this point, my voice is probably familiar, but for those of you listening for the very first time, my name is Noah Hunter, and I'm the editor-in-chief and co-founder here at Final Weapon. I direct all our coverage, whether written or video, and of course, you might have saw me previously on series like Under the Plate, Beyond the Conduit, or even our other podcast, Weaponized. And today, I'll be joined by a very special co-host who's yet to make an appearance on the channel so far. Take it away, Cyrus.
Hello, my name is Saras Rajpal. I am a staff writer at Final Weapon. I've been here since 2022, and I've mostly worked on reviews for games like Marvel Spider-Man 2, Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, and in terms of Nintendo, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake.
Yeah, Cyrus is a pretty big Nintendo fan, though I think he might have added a year to his tenure. I think it was 2023. But I'm very looking forward to having Cyrus here as a co-host, and I think we've got all kinds of stuff to talk about, especially in this massive year for Nintendo and everything really in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it feels like it's been more than 2 years at this point, but yes, I have been here for a decent amount of time, and I am very much excited to see what the future of Nintendo holds in the next year and beyond.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think obviously, really, we should probably kick it off with the Switch too.
Absolutely.
So Nintendo finally, at last, revealed the Switch 2 last week, and that lead up was so funny because, we go from the Switch Pro to, okay, there's not a Switch Pro, there's a Switch Lite, to a Switch OLED, to finally, we're not getting an extra console, it's just going to be the Switch 2. And after years of rumors and just everything in between, last week it finally happened. And my goodness, I mean, the meltdowns on Twitter the night before when people thought, oh my gosh, oh man, the leaks were wrong. We're not getting an announcement of the announcement. It's not happening. Were so funny. I mean, people
Yeah.
were like acting like their homes were destroyed. It was insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember how so much of the discourse for the past few years related to Nintendo has always been like, what's the next thing? There were arguably, I think, Switch Pro rumors floating around since 2019, and I think they stopped around 2023, and then the question became, okay, when's the next console coming out and what that will look like? And yeah, my favorite part of the meltdown the day before the announcement was everyone was expecting something to happen at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and at that exact moment, Nintendo decided to post the new profile pictures for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD that will be available on the Nintendo Switch Online service. And the entire comments was just flooded with people like, man, this is not what we wanted.
No, it's so funny. Nintendo's marketing for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD specifically has been so funny because, I mean, the whole weeks leading up to the launch, everyone was like, there's no way they dropped this on the same day as Donkey Kong. And then, oh my gosh, stop posting Donkey Kong. We just want the Switch too.
Yeah, absolutely. Donkey Kong marketing is always fun.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I really just wish we would have gotten a new game on Switch. And don't get me wrong, like, we'll talk more later about, Donkey Kong and everything Nintendo has for this year. But, I mean, Returns, having that on the Switch is awesome. I had a great time with it. But, yeah, man, we need that new game already. Come on, Nintendo.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A 3D Donkey Kong, or even just another 2D platformer similar to Tropical Freeze or Returns would be amazing.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I always think back to that, man, that rumor forever that the Odyssey team was working on a 3D Donkey Kong game.
Yes.
And I looked forward to that from like 2019 until basically the end of time to present because I'm like, oh my gosh, Nintendo, you have to make this happen. And it didn't happen, but there's hope for Switch 2 for sure. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, speaking on that, so what did you think of the reveal trailer?
I think it was somehow everything I wanted it to be, and yet it still managed to surprise me. I vividly remember waking up at 8 a.m. and kind of just checking for fun to see if a notification had dropped from Nintendo. I was fully expecting it to be like a launch trailer for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. And so when I looked at the account and I saw an update from Nintendo, I almost just bolted out of bed. And I I think it was the exactly perfect way they could have executed this reveal because compare it to the original Switch, where they mostly focused on showing people playing the console and overviewing what makes the console different from its predecessor at the time, the Wii U. And, it showed the dock mechanics, the Joy-Cons, kind of how you can take the Switch anywhere and everywhere without any compromises. Here, everyone is already familiar with the Switch. So they don't focus on what you know, they focus on what we don't know and the things that make this different from the predecessor. The magnetic Joy Cons is a feature I've personally been hoping for a few years now. And the potential of new functionality with the Joy Cons, the new colors, the bigger screen, the new stand, these are all quality of life updates that people have been they didn't really realize they wanted. I've heard different rumblings of different things of like people saying, "Man, I wish the stand for the Switch 2 was a bit sturdier," or I wish that there was more to do with the Joy-Cons. I wish there wasn't Joy-Con drift. And with the brand new designs and clearly from the ground up approach they're taking, um, definitely it's I think they're on the right track. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, for the longest time, and really, I mean, with previous console announcements, Nintendo's kind of had the approach of show a little bit now, hold off till later. And that's pretty much exactly what they did. I mean, it was a fun reveal trailer. I think getting to see it finally, officially, was really cool. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty much what I expected, but I definitely got a huge adrenaline rush from like the way I love how they built up from the original Switch. Like, oh, okay, the tablet's getting bigger. We're getting rid of the fingerprint magnets on the back and just kind of building up from that. And then, actually getting to see the Joy-Con physically next to the new one was really cool. And I'm so glad they're bigger. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really fun trailer. Obviously, Mario Kart 9 at the end was a really nice touch and really interesting if you really pay attention to the footage of just how much they're adding to it. But I mean, yeah, I'm super excited. And the fact that they've already confirmed, yeah, we're going to show the whole thing off in April is awesome. And I'm telling you, that's probably going to be the most viewed direct of all time. I would be
Oh,
willing to
for
bet.
sure. Yeah, especially because I checked to going back. Neither the original showcase trailer for the Nintendo Switch or the showcase direct, which was, I think it was just an industry conference rather than an actual
Yeah,
proper
yeah.
direct. Neither of them are available on the YouTube channel. I think taking a more I guess, traditional approach to presenting the Switch 2 for both fans and investors is absolutely the right call. Um, I imagine it will likely be a digital presentation similar to the directs we usually get. Um, but yeah, Mario Kart was the big bombshell. I think we all had different theories on what the first game shown for the Switch 2 could potentially be. Um, I remember I heard a lot of people thinking it would be 3D Mario was the big one. And the fact that it was Mario Kart is so perfect and it makes so much sense because that is almost definitely the most successful franchise Nintendo has because it has defined most, if not all, of their consoles for the last 10 years or more.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're going to pick a title to launch that you're thinking, okay, because taking a step back, right? If you ask me, I want 3D Mario at launch. I love 3D
Absolutely.
Mario. I want the single player content. However, if you want to sell systems and you want to be like, hey, you need to get a Switch 2 to play this game with your friends, it's Mario Kart. It has to be. And so I
Hmm.
think showing that off initially and just being like, hey guys, like here's the new Mario Kart. We know you're gonna buy it and we know you need to Switch 2 to play it is genius because again, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold 65 million copies on Switch 1, which it's weird to refer to it as that, but that's basically
Right.
what it is at this point. But Switch on Nintendo Switch, Mario Kart 8 has sold 65 million copies, and there's 140 something Nintendo Switches in the wild, which is
Wow.
an insane attachment rate. Like that just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. So I think that assuming that this is the launch title, it's the best thing they could have done, and I'm really interested to see what the big change is. And I mean, we could talk on a couple of them. Like the one big thing that we know, at least from the trailer, is that there's spots for 24 cars. So there's going to be
Yes.
24 player support, which is a huge deal. I mean, it's a huge deal.
Yeah, I love the thought of 200cc with 24 carts. I think that'll be 24 players, which would be absolutely insane. And I'm really curious to see how the level designs reflect that. Because traditionally in the past, with other Mario Kart games, we've had a selection of courses that are both completely new and a selection of courses that are quote unquote retro. Um, and in the case of Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the retro tracks are usually retrofitted to fit whatever gimmick or new mechanic that the new Mario Kart games will feature. And so I'm curious to see how the designs of each track will be reflected and changed because of the new player count. I mean, we already saw with this circuit, which it appears to be called Mario Brothers Circuit, which is a new one, um, that has way wider tracks. And it'll be curious to see how they kind of like take that to other designs, both for new and especially for the retro tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely going to have to expand all the tracks regardless. I mean, with the Mario Brothers track, I just kind of want to go eat at the Yoshi's Diner. Like
Yeah, for sure. For
I think
sure.
they need to add that to Universal.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting. I actually saw a couple people online be like, "Oh, is the Mario Kart series going in a new direction of like Forza Horizon?" And I'm like, "No. If you think about it, the Mario Kart tracks as they are now would just be utter chaos with 24 players.
Yeah.
So you have to expand it and have enough room for like, 8 people in a row to drift, right? So I think that's what they're doing there. But yeah, I totally agree. I'm curious how that might change. And for me at least, I'm most curious what I mean, lack of a better word, the gimmick is going to be with this Mario Kart.
Yep.
Because, for the one on 3DS for 7, it was gliders. And then Mario Kart 8 had the gravity, and I think it was 7 as well that had the underwater.
It
Maybe
did.
it was the one
Yes.
before, but that all kind of added all this new ways of change for Mario Kart, and obviously 24 players is a ton. That's gonna be a big change on its own. I can't imagine finishing at 24th, but beyond the point,
Oof.
I think I'm really curious to see what they're gonna do there because I think that 24 players isn't enough to breathe new life into it. I
Hmm.
saw some people online talking about the trailer. If you see on the side of the carts, it looks like there's almost like a fuel intake. So I thought
Yes.
about that. Like, I'm almost wondering what if they did like a fuel system and
Yeah.
I mean, that would be really interesting. But I don't know. I mean, do you have any thoughts on like what you think they might add? Because I've kind of been at a loss thinking about this. I just want it to be something fun and unique. I mean, you can drive on the moon, you can drive underwater, you could drive in the air. Like, what's next, really?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things I saw, um, two things I noticed. One in one of the under the Yoshi's diner, I think you can see a Wonder Seed from Super Mario Wonder, and I imagine that will probably be a new power up, maybe, or some other piece of the mechanic. And something else I thought about was apparently in a blink and you miss it shot, there's something that looks like almost treads on one of the carts, and I wonder with how open these tracks are and how, especially the Mario Bros. Circuit has this like very open field. I wonder if there'll be almost like more distinct off-road mechanics, which wouldn't be really a big gimmick in comparison to, anti-gravity or the addition of being able to fly and go underwater. But the key thing is figuring out how these mechanics would impact the designs that everyone is familiar with the Mario Kart franchise and how it changes tracks. And so having potentially a something akin to an off-road mode, either where you can switch between or kind of use it for different shortcuts, would completely change the design of pretty much any track because thinking about the underwater mechanic, how a lot of previous tracks before Mario Kart 7, water was an out of bounds zone. You would instantly be taken away by Lakitu. And in every Mario Kart game, and pretty much any racing game, there are those, grassy fields, dirt fields, desert fields that are almost out of bounds for the player. And they don't, immediately have Lakitu pick you up, but they do slow you down. So having it so that there are more areas where players can operate and sort of tool their own playstyle would be huge, especially with how big the courses are probably going to be now.
Oh, 100%. And I know you mentioned that the tracks thing. I'm pretty sure I also saw a screenshot with like skis on the side of Rosalina's
Yes.
car,
Yeah,
which is super
yeah.
interesting. So I think the off-road thing makes a lot of sense, and that really could open it up because you'll see people now. I mean, nowadays in Mario Kart 8, if you go in the off-road, you're like super slow. So
Unless
I
you have a
wonder,
mushroom.
yeah, and it almost makes me wonder like what if there's stages that are built around the off-road stuff? Like maybe we have
hmm
like a mudslide one where there's like, kind of you have to use different controls or the ski on a big mountain. Like think about like, they've retooled like Mount Wario and you have to go through
Yes.
like avalanches basically. Like that would be super, super cool. So I'm
hmm
really curious to kind of see how that evolves and if that's more than just cosmetics. And also, like Nintendo, hate me if you want, like we need costumes. Like give me something.
Yes.
Give me
Yes.
something. Oh,
Yeah.
speaking of, I'm really curious. What characters, if you had to name like three characters you think that will make it in that are new, like who do you think will make it in this Mario Kart?
Oh man. I feel like there are a few kind of obvious ones. At least ones that were potentially DLC before that could be part of the launch roster. Like I'm pretty sure Pauline will be there from the beginning instead of being part of the booster pass. Um, and I think another one that will likely happen is something that a lot of the Mario Kart games like to do, and Mario games in general that are spin off, like the sports games, they'll have characters from the most recent either 2D or 3D Mario game.
Yep.
So I have a feeling that we'll see some of the characters from Wonder, likely the Prince. I think it would be hilarious if the Flower is a character. I hope he talks during the entirety of the stage, or he's some kind of commentator. I don't know. I think that there are a lot of different ideas, and something I really want to see that is kind of far out there is I really hope that we get more characters that are not necessarily Mario related because Mario Kart 8 kind of pushed that forward where we had Link, we had the Villager, we had Animal Crossing adjacent characters, we had later Inkling, and it wasn't new really for the series because in I think Mario Kart DS it had Rob of all characters. Um,
Bring him
so I
back.
wonder.
Bring him back. I want to
Bring
see
him
him
back.
back.
Yes, I want to see Rob again. I was thinking about how a few years ago when they were in the hype cycle for Smash Brothers on Wii U, there was a trailer that showed Rainbow Road off, and everyone thought it was from Mario Kart 8 at first, but then Kirby comes in on the Warp Star, and of course it turns out to be a Smash Brothers trailer confirming Rosalina. But I've kind of thought
Hmm.
about that for the last few years, just thinking, man, it could be kind of funny if we got a Kirby Air Ride spiritual successor with Kirby just being a playable character. in his own little tiny cart. I think that'd be hilarious.
Oh no, 100%. Like I know Nintendo won't do this, but I wish that they would put like budget into making like Mario Kart character reveals,
Yes.
which it's so different. It's so different from Smash. It doesn't make any sense, but
Oh
I'm
my
like,
god.
oh my gosh. Like I'll be honest, my three, if I had to pick three, which I'm probably gonna get some hate down in the comments for this, but I'm thinking so number one, I agree with you. I think they're gonna put someone from Mario Wonder in, except
Hmm.
I don't think the Prince makes it. I think they're gonna do Elephant Mario. So I think Elephant
Yes.
Mario will be the character that they're gonna add
Yeah,
from
I could
that.
see that.
And then after, I mean, like I'll be honest, I think Donkey Kong, let's go. Let's get either Cranky or my personal pick, K. Rule.
Mm,
Um, I want to push the K. Rule agenda because he needs to be in the next Donkey Kong Country game.
for sure, for sure.
But I think another Donkey Kong rec could be cool. But for my final one, and I literally am still so shocked that this hasn't happened. Professor Egad needs to be in this Mario Kart.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I'm
that's a
telling you,
no-brainer.
Luigi's Mansion has outsold your favorite game. I don't care what your
Yep.
favorite game is, it probably has outsold it because it's sold like over 15 million copies at this point. If they
Yep.
don't do EGAD, I think they do go Guigi.
Yep.
But I think you have to have you have to have a Luigi's Mansion rep in here. Like, the series is so big at this point, it makes no sense. Like, give us Professor EGAD. Because with 24 players, I almost think that there's guaranteed going to be 48 characters to choose from.
Agreed. I think it'll be a huge roster, probably the biggest we've gotten in this franchise's history.
It has to be. I mean, you think about the different things that Nintendo has done over the years. I mean, with 24 players playing one Mario Kart game,
Oh
there's
man.
got to be some choice in there. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
just saying. And I honestly would prefer more than 48, but I think 48 is a safe number to bet.
agreed. I think it's interesting thinking about the roster for Mario Kart, especially because one, and this really just occurred to me because it doesn't really feel like it. We really haven't gotten a new Mario Kart in over 10 years at this point. You know, and we've usually in the past we've had new Mario Karts with every console. I think since the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, you know, there's been Super Mario Kart, there's been Mario Kart 64, Double Dash, you know, and all the other ones, Mario Kart DS, Mario Kart Wii, Mario Kart 7, and there has been a new Mario Kart pretty much every single generation, but the Switch didn't get its own Mario Kart. And in theory, that may not sound significant because obviously they kept updating Mario Kart 8, but Nintendo has released a lot of games related to their core franchise in 8 years. I mean, for all we know, they could even have some pulls from Princess Peach Showtime, or if they really want to do deep cuts, like, you know, they just had remasters and brand new entries in their RPG franchises. We got the return of Mario RPG, we got the return of Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, and we got a brand new Mario and Luigi game. I mean, I cannot wait for the inevitable repeat of the Smash Brothers discourse of everyone asking, "Where's Gino in Mario Kart?" And then they're just gonna have Mallow instead.
Oh,
Honestly, I
man.
would take either Mallow or Gino. But I think the big thing is seeing how they really kind of almost catch up on everything that they have done in the last few years. And obviously, the other big thing is the new character redesigns. And in some cases, you know, they're not that major. Mario looks a bit more rounder. His mustache and his hat bounce a bit more. His eyes look more wide. But Donkey Kong looks completely different. His eyes look haunting. It's scary.
See, okay, I think a lot of people are so caught up with the Mario movie, which, to be fair, I think Nintendo as a whole is just pushing for this new evolved evolved era of Mario that's basically like, hey, you know, we want to push towards more like animation like fluidity throughout the character
Hmm.
designs. So you'll see art tracing back to like late 2019, early 2020 that's with Donkey Kong in that style. And I think that's kind of what they were going for regardless. But yeah, it's super off putting, and I agree. Like, it's kind of haunting.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how certain characters have different designs. I think the one that I've been thinking about a lot was when Pauline was added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Even when she had this was years after Odyssey, of course. But the key thing is that her design didn't really follow her Odyssey design. She didn't have her hat, she didn't have her crazy dress. Um, and so I think it'd be cool to have a little bit more of that kind of Odyssey flair. And, certain characters will probably have minor or major touch ups. Like, oh god, if Donkey Kong looks like that, how is Waluigi gonna look?
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot to be said there in terms of kind of what this new era for Nintendo is going to look like. And I mean, thankfully, we've only got about 2 months left till we find
Absolutely.
out. But yeah, I mean, I think kind of moving on, is there anything else really like with Switch 2 that you're super interested in? Like for me, I think I'm really interested to see how these optical sensors in the Joy-Con work because it's like
Hmm.
if these can operate as as a mouse, how is that going to work with all of these games? Like are you going to be able to like play Mario Kart like on your table? Like it's weird.
Yep. Yeah, that would be interesting. And I think, I my association with mouse is always like point and click adventure games, and it'd be interesting to see how like we got a new Monkey Island for the first time in a few years. I think that also came out on the Nintendo Switch, and having that style be on the Switch kind of operate like it would on a PC. Like, how would that change basic things? Like, does that mean, if they do third party shooters, how's that going to work? So I think that there's a lot of different approaches they could take. For me, the most exciting thing for me is actually just the magnetic Joy-Con because it's such a simple thing, but it's something that is really going to make, portability a lot easier. And I'm excited to really be able to take the Switch anywhere and everywhere even more without having to worry about like, you know, the slotting out of the Joy Cons, and it always makes it's more it would be more convenient having it just kind of slot on if the screen itself is in the dock. I don't have to just kind of finagle my hands and get it into the right position to slot it in. And I think that'd be great for all audiences, especially kids, having because everyone to some extent understands how this new mechanic would work. That all you just need to do is have it close and it'll snap on. So I think that'll be a huge accessibility thing for a lot of people. And of course, clearly as they're rebuilding their Joy Cons from the ground up, we're obviously going to get a lot of improvements to basic things like drift and how the sticks control and feel. And I'm really excited to inevitably get my hands on it and hopefully soon.
Yeah, no, I definitely I mean, I'll say personally, I really have never had any trouble with the Joy-Cons on the rails. I think they've been fine, but I do think that this new design is a lot better solely because, there's a little bit of wiggle with the Joy-Con on the rail right now, and the only attachment is at that bottom part of the rail.
Hmm.
And so I think having it magnetic is going to create a firmer attachment, and it'll be a more kind of, the Switch is one piece instead of three, right? Create that illusion because that's what Nintendo tries to do with the handheld.
Absolutely, yeah. But I'm excited to see when we get closer to April, kind of seeing how because of course the other big announcement that isn't really surprising, but it's still a huge relief, is that all most original Switch games will be compatible with the Switch 2. And of course, that raises the question of, will there be any cases of games that have almost improved visuals on the Switch 2 that are more like optimized? Obviously, the Zelda games will likely have a huge boost on the Nintendo Switch 2, particularly Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. But it'll be interesting to see how you know, games coming out this year or games that released last year will sort of work with the Switch too, and how that'll compare to games that are designed natively for the new console.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so Nintendo president Furukawa confirmed that there would be backwards compatibility late last year, just after their November investors meeting, I think. But to see the visual of it, I think did it for a lot of people of like, okay, wait, they said that you could use your Nintendo account. They said software was going to be playable, but then you finally you're like, okay, wait, Mario Wonders on the new system, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it'll be really interesting. Obviously, still a rumor, but we know that there's going to be DLSS enabled on Switch 2. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a handful of games that run at uncapped frame rates that will just instantly receive support and they won't have to do anything and they'll run at 60 FPS. But there's definitely quite a few. I mean, Zelda's a good one. For me, like the Xenoblade games desperately need to take advantage of this.
Oh, for
I can
sure.
tell you, like playing Xenoblade 2 on handheld at 360p is not fun. And
God.
I'm really hoping that that gets addressed. And I don't know. For me, I'm not so sure that there's going to be a fix for every game. I think Nintendo's going to
Agreed.
pick like their top 50 and that's what's going to get patched because
Yeah.
I mean, while this isn't something that's a huge deal, I think it's something that would really make a lot of people happy, and I hope that they invest into it. And to be fair, they did actually buy out, I forget the company's name, but they bought out a Switch 2 like expert porting studio that
Yes, I
solely
remember something
ported.
like that.
So I almost wonder if they're going to be like, "Hey, you guys make all our games run better on Switch 2." Because that would be
Mm-hmm.
great. I'd love that. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I'm just excited to see the games, man. Like I think, I got to talk about it. We have to talk about it. But the reactions to this trailer have been insane, and I think
Oh my
so many
God.
people have been out of touch with reality. I mean, just talking a little bit from my perspective, like let's take let's take it back to 2017, and for me, it's like, what has everyone asked for since 2017? A more powerful Switch. Hey guys, Nintendo, the Switch is awesome, but it's not powerful enough, and I want to play current gen games, and I want your games to run better. So please make a more powerful Switch. People begged and begged and begged and begged for years for a Switch Pro. We finally get the next console. It's a more powerful Switch, and everyone's like, Nintendo doesn't innovate. Nintendo forgot how to innovate. And I'm just sitting here like, this is what you asked for. This is what we asked for years. They gave it to you. Like, why are you complaining? I don't get it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of crazy discussions over the last week. For me, one of the more interesting discussions is the name of the console just being Nintendo Switch 2. A lot of people have been saying, "Oh, that's, too simple of a name. It doesn't really capture that same creativity that Nintendo is known for." And to that I say, I don't know. I think a lot of people clearly don't remember the Wii U era. Um, I vividly remember when the Wii U was first properly announced in 2011 after a few years of discussion. Back then, it was only known as Project Cafe, and then they fully announced it as the Wii U. And I remember everyone, myself and my family included, were so confused because the gamepad was the main thing in focus in all of the footage. And the brief snippets you'd get of the new console looked almost identical to the original Wii. And for a year, everyone was like, "Oh, is this an accessory? Is this sort of like the Wii Fit balance pad? Is this something extra you would buy for the original Wii rather than a brand new console?" It was so bad that in 2012 they literally re-announced the console and had a completely new showcase, completely new details. They even introduced the black version of the console to further distinguish it from the Wii. And that initial sort of confusion caused a lot of, you know, people to not want to buy into it because they were like, "Oh, this is basically the exact same thing as the original Wii, just with an added, gamepad." And I think people underestimate how simple and effective of a naming convention just going two is, or I don't necessarily think that means we're going to get a Nintendo Switch 3 in a few years, but I think thinking about it from the perspective of kids and parents nowadays very much understand the language of upgrading to new hardware, even if we're not just thinking about other consoles that go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. The iPhones, all have numbered conventions, and everyone's like, okay, I will get my kid an iPhone 15. The last phone they had was an iPhone 13, so clearly the 15 is better than the 13. And I think calling it a Super Switch or a Switch Advance, like other previous naming conventions or what a lot of people wanted, would create the wrong idea and would make people think, oh, this is just a pro version rather than a brand new console. I think the name is kind of perfect, and it means that we don't have to transition from the code name to the actual name. I mean, I remember everyone called it the Nintendo NX before we knew it was called the Switch, and it took a lot of people a lot of time to get used to the name of Switch. And everyone's been calling it the Switch 2 for a year, and now we know it's called the Switch 2. So that makes things easier.
Yeah, and I think the Apple comparison is great. It's iterative hardware, and people have gotten used to that and accustomed to it, as you said. But no, I mean, I think the comments from people online about how it's so boring and plain and old, it's like, well, it works for PlayStation. Are you going to say this for PlayStation 6? No.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to say it for anything else? No. And I mean, that's the thing. And the funny thing for me, the people complaining, oh, well, why are we getting Switch 2? Well, let's look at Nintendo's history. People claiming this is not innovative need to look back at the history of Nintendo. We went from the Nintendo Entertainment System to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. And then, what is that not iterative? Is that I think that's super innovative. I mean, we went from 8-bit to 16-bit graphics, right? And take the N64 to the GameCube. We added optical disc drives and a couple more features, and that was it. And then look at the Game Boy to the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Advance. I mean, all this stuff is innovative, but it is still in the same line of product. And Wii and Wii U, as you just said, it really boils down to the fact that Nintendo, for the entirety of the 40 years it's been within the games industry, has operated under two-phase cycles for most of its consoles. NES to SNES, N64 to GameCube, Wii to Wii U, now Switch to Switch 2. It makes perfect sense, and at the end of the day, I don't think we'll get a Switch 3. Although, if you were to ask me, I think that the Switch is the most perfect console that's been released ever, because it has everything you could ever want on it. And I think the Switch 2 will top it in that regard. Will it outsell it? No, but I think it'll top it in that regard. But I think, yeah, I mean, Nintendo has what it needs right now. And with the name, as you said, I mean, let's look at investors and people like that. Yeah, it's super confusing for people when it's not just basic, but I totally agree with your points. I think it would have been confusing for people, and Nintendo for this cycle is playing it as safe as possible, and that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean it's not innovative. That doesn't mean it's this or that. It simply means that they literally just put out their best-selling console, soon to be, of all time, and why would you not want to follow it up with a sequel? I mean, you'd be dumb not to. And so, yeah, I mean, I think even the logo, right? Everyone knows what the Nintendo Switch logo is. It's so iconic at this point. Why would you change it? That's what I have. And to be fair, I saw people commenting online like, oh, the 2 should have been with the Nintendo Switch, actual word under the logo. But that would have been too small and too confusing, and people would have just been, okay, the Switch logo, yep, it's just the same thing. The 2 is so big and it's right there that it's it's unmissable. You have to see it, and it's something different, because wait, why is there 2 there? It's different. So I think all the discourse is very dumb, and the biggest thing for me, we have not yet to see anything. We've seen nothing. They've not shown any single feature off. The only thing we know is that the Joy-Cons attach magnetically and there's an 8-inch screen. That's it. We don't know anything about what the system's capable of. We don't know what the optical sensors are going to do on the Joy-Con. We don't know what the C button is, which they mysteriously grayed out in the trailer. And we don't know anything about the UI. So I don't know how you could sit here and tell me that it's not innovative, and especially when most of Nintendo's innovation comes through its games and software development. But
Yes.
hey, man, that's just me.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Nintendo has always operated on two key fronts, and when they have deviated from that, they've usually had little success. The first is micro, like even when we think that their gimmicks are in the long run small, they add up in time. I mean, comparatively, the GameCube's gimmick wasn't really that special. I mean, really, the gimmick was, of course, besides the new discs, um, was the fact that it had a handle. And the DS, I think, is the best example of small upgrades go a long way. Um, I vividly remember when it went from the DS to the DSi. And the DS, if you compare both consoles, really the only difference is UI. The DSi can't play Game Boy games anymore, and there's now a camera and in-depth sound features. And at the time, this was like kind of around, not like a little bit before when iPhones started becoming big. So it was almost ahead of its time, but looking back in hindsight, it's not that big of a change. And Nintendo's small things kind of add up, and as you mentioned, the key thing is games, and that's the second front they operate on. The main thing that we need to see with the Nintendo Switch 2 is its launch roster, because that is how they live and die, quite frankly. Um, the 3DS and the Wii U had, unfortunately, very lackluster launch rosters. There were some great hits here and there, but comparatively to the Nintendo Switch, which had Breath of the Wild on day one, and within a few months, we had Splatoon 2, we had ARMS, we had the new Xenoblade, we had Odyssey, and even other games before the around the Wii. I mean, of course, we had Wii Sports, and DS had Super Mario 64 DS. And these are great games that showed off the capabilities of the console while also getting people to be excited about buying the console. And I think that's going to be what really matters. And we won't know anything about what games will be available and designed exclusively for the Switch 2 until April. We might hear about some of the original Switch games and how maybe they'll work better on the Switch 2, but they'll still be designed for the original Switch, such as Xenoblade Chronicles X and Pokemon Legends. But we're not going to hear anything about what we can expect from the Nintendo Switch 2 until April, which is torture because, a few months away, but I have a feeling that it'll be April before we know it.
Oh, for sure. And, I'll be honest, like, maybe to counteract your point, like, the Switch 2, or the Switch launch, and rather, I don't think was that great. Like, it
Mm,
had Breath of the Wild, but what did it have besides that? We had Shovel Knight, Just Dance, and Snipper Clips, and that was it.
yeah,
But I'll
you're
tell
not
you,
wrong.
Nintendo Switch 2's launch is going to be fantastic, and that's solely because we have 7 years, or rather 8 years, of third-party support that has basically just not made it to Switch 2 because people were, oh gosh, how's this going to perform? We have no idea. They held off and didn't release any big games on the Switch until like late year 2, year 3, whenever it started really picking up. And I think for a lot of people and a lot of companies in particular, they want their games in front of the Nintendo audience. And I
Hmm.
wouldn't be surprised to see some massive titles on day one alongside Mario Kart.
Agreed. Yeah, I you make a good point there, and I think something else that made me think of is how different this launch and build up cycle is going to be compared to the original Switch, because I was actually rewatching some of those 2017, 2018 Nintendo Directs, and they were rough, not just because of the games they showed off, but also because half of the conference would be dedicated to 3DS games. And you'd be sitting there wondering, like, oh, great, Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story is coming to the Nintendo 3DS. Why isn't it on the Switch? People have been wanting these games on consoles, and there is no Switch version, and we still don't have a Switch version. And now, because the 3DS is quite past its lifetime, when we get that announcement, when we get directs in near the Summer Game Fest season and in, the fall, likely some of them will be focused on games that will be available for both the original Switch and the Switch 2, but also will have fully focused segments based on, games that are designed with the Switch 2 in mind as the sole focus. So I think that's going to be a key difference in having the hype cycle be more consistent than it was with the original Switch. But my question to you is, on the subject of third party games, what are some big third party games that you would really want to see come to the Switch 2?
Oh man. I mean, there's a ton of them, right? But I will say, I think every single game I'm about to say is going to come to Switch 2. I am
Mm,
fully under the impression that every developer is going to move everything they can to Switch 2 because the Switch 1 just sold so well, it's kind of like they don't have a choice. So I think, right from the gate, the big ones I want are Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, which we're recording this on Thursday, the 23rd, and Rebirth just dropped on PC. And I can tell you, I've been playing it for a bit. It's great. It runs awesome. And the game can run on Steam Deck without DLSS. I think it's going to be able to run fine on Switch, so I don't want to hear that. But I think a lot of big games that we've seen, like I think for launch, oh my gosh, I mean, I think Resident Evil 4 Remake would be a phenomenal launch title. And that's an easy thing. Capcom just has to port the game, put it in a complete package, add in the gold edition with the Ada DLC, and I mean, there you go. You have a $60 launch title that people are going to buy up. I mean, truthfully. And I think there's that. I would love to see Devil May Cry 5, a bunch of big action games like that come over. I mean, really, a lot of these games that released on like PS4 that just didn't make it to Switch. Like, I know this is kind of a stretch and a reach, but like, we're talking about Final Fantasy, like Final Fantasy 16 and the stretch here, like Final Fantasy 15 even. Like, let's bring these older titles that were, too powerful, or we don't want to put the effort in for Switch, and let's bring them to Switch too and make this library as big as can be. But for, 2025 titles that I want to see, Ninja Gaiden just got announced. Ninja
yep.
Gaiden 4 by Platinum and Xbox and Koei Tecmo. I'd love to see that on Switch too. And I think Doom the Dark Ages is as good of a lock as you can get. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a launch title, just considering Bethesda supported the Switch in years past with Doom and Doom Eternal as well. And I mean, with Bethesda, I mean, there's the rumor of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion remake. I would love to see that on Switch. I think Starfield on Switch is something that might happen.
Maybe,
And I don't
yeah.
know. I mean, Xbox has so much that they will probably be bringing. I think, there's the rumor that the Master Chief Collection's coming. And I think
Oh
that
my
would be
God.
like the ultimate game to bring to Switch. And I would play
Absolutely.
hundreds and hundreds of hours again, like I did when it came to PC. So I don't know. I mean, there's so much, and I really hate it because I'm a really big physical collector. So, even if I review a game or get, buy it digitally, like I tend to get a physical down the line. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm screwed because I'm going to be buying so many games for Switch 2. I mean, I don't know. Like, do you feel like the Switch 2 having portability and being able to run these games like really well portably is like enough of a factor to make you want to rebuy them? Because for me, it's like I really feel like games like, Resident Evil 4 and Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, please give us ports and stuff like that. That's enough for me. I'm like, oh, I'll like triple dip at this point or quadruple dip in some cases.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's funny that you bring that up because you brought up the Steam Deck, and I've gotten a lot of mileage out of my Steam Deck for the past few since I think 2022. And I there are games that I will rebuy just to have just to have it be portable, right? Like Persona 5 Royal, I got again. I've bought in that game I think like 3 times at this point just so I could have it on the go. And I think that there are so many games that if they had versions that, for like kind of, you brought up Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, I would love to have those on the Switch. Another one, because you mentioned Bethesda, I would love to see some of the Fallout games come to Switch, especially
Oh
New
yeah.
Vegas. Yeah, Halo would be great, Doom would be great, and I think so many of these games, we underestimated how much of a big deal portability is, because I've been traveling a lot past few months, and the Switch and the Steam Deck were kind of my lifeline abroad. And I would see, when I would be going to college, I would see people be playing the Switch on the train. And I caught someone actually playing Persona 4 Golden on the Switch. And I thought that was amazing. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of people, especially for games that are sort of deemed impossible to come to portable consoles and run well. I mean, Cyberpunk is kind of a pipe dream, but I would love to see that run on the Switch, especially if it runs so well on the Steam Deck. And CD Projekt Red has been doing a lot for the Switch. I mean, Witcher 3 came out within the first, I believe, year or two when the original Switch came out. And I would love to see more big scale RPGs on the Switch, because honestly, I feel like those are best played on Portal. I mean, Metaphor ReFantazio, um, Persona 3 Reload, and countless others, I think would be incredible on the portable consoles. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think having them be portable and having them run on decent hardware, especially with the Switch 2 potentially having even better hardware, I think is more than enough reason for me personally to double dip and sometimes triple dip a game and buy it multiple times if I have to.
Yeah, no. And on your point on Cyberpunk, I honestly, for me, I think I'm going to be surprised if it doesn't happen solely because The Witcher 3 sold really well on Switch.
Yeah.
It released in, I think it was October 2019, but I remember that it sold about 700,000 copies that year, I think. So it definitely at this
Wow.
point has probably sold over a million copies on Switch, which is pretty crazy. For a game that was pretty 5 years old at that point or 4 years old. So I would be really surprised if Cyberpunk doesn't happen. I mean, it runs on Steam Deck and stuff like that, but
And
yeah,
Mac now, apparently.
yeah, I guess that's great. I no offense, Mac users, not my thing, but that's good. I'm. It's interesting to see companies try to look at Mac recently. Like Capcom put a bunch of the RE games. I remember Village came to Mac not too long ago, so it's interesting stuff. But yeah, man, I think that there's going to be a ton of third party support, and it'll be really exciting for everyone. But to kind of turn the page, I think really we got to talk about like what Nintendo has this year confirmed and what we might see after we get the April Direct. So to kind of list off what we have, so Donkey Kong Country Returns HD released last week in January 15th. So that's out. And the only other dated game we have is Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition out March 20th. And beyond that, we've got Pokemon Legend ZA, Metroid Prime 4, and then Professor Layton is like exclusive, so we're counting that.
Yeah, I
So,
think that there's. Oh, you go.
oh, sorry. So, what are you thinking on the lineup so far, and what kind of games are you hoping might fit in as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think back to games that I've been wanting for a long time. I mean, Metroid Prime 4 is kind of a big one. I mean, it's crazy to think about it. That was one of the first games announced for the Nintendo Switch. And finally, after 8 years, we're getting it on the console. And I think that'll be great. And I'm hoping maybe soon we can also get Metroid Prime 2 and 3 remastered so we can have the whole collection on one console. I think that'd be great. And Pokemon Legends ZA, I'm morbidly curious about it. I really enjoyed Legends Arceus, even though, sorry, other Nintendo fans, I'm not the biggest Pokemon fan in the world. But I did enjoy Legends, and though my only gripes with it were graphical fidelity and textures and frame rate and things like that. I imagine that those problems will be hopefully solved with the Switch 2. Um, but in terms of games that will be made with the Switch 2 in mind, I think the biggest one um, is, of course, a new 3D Mario. Right? I would love to see a new 3D Mario. We haven't gotten a brand new one since 2017, and I would love to see it take the lessons from Odyssey and Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury and kind of combine that with clearly this new visual style we're getting for the franchise with Wonder and the new Mario Kart. And obviously, I really want to see more from other franchises like Kirby. I'm hoping we get a new Kirby 3D platformer soon. I would love to see that. Yeah, we were talking about a new Donkey Kong. That'd be great. I There's so many big ones. I mean, I think it'll be a few years before we get a new Zelda, like a proper big scale Zelda game. But I do feel like we might get some remakes. Um, Personally, I would really love to see a from the ground up remake of some of the 64 games. Like I would really like to see a new version of Ocarina of Time and especially Majora's Mask. Um, but for me, if there is one game and one franchise I could bring back from the Nintendo catalog, believe it or not, it would be Punch Out. I have been wanting a new Punch Out for years, ever since Punch Out Wii. And the Switch would have been perfect, especially with ARMS having the motion controls. I really wanted Little Mac as a guest character, but unfortunately not. So hopefully, at some point, we can get something new with the Punch Out franchise. How about you? What do you really want to see this year and in the years beyond potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I would love a new Punch Out. Nintendo, make it happen, please. But I'm gonna
Please.
start with what I think is gonna happen, and then I'm gonna go into kind of my wilder predictions. So we've got obviously January, February. Well, to be fair, February is still open, but
Hmm.
January, March are done. I think Pokemon Legends is not going to release in November. It's going to be, I don't know when, but I don't think it's going to be November.
Maybe a
And
summer
then
title?
I could see August, yeah. But I think really what Nintendo's going to do is we're going to get a direct next month for February. And you'll notice the games, obviously, that we have confirmed now are Switch titles. They're not Switch 2. And I think that's what, obviously, next month we'll focus on. And, Nintendo's not going to go out and just abandon the Switch platform. They have to keep it going, at least for these next 18 months, I would say. So I think what the plan's going to be is to drop the rest of the catalog that they've had just sitting in, sitting on they've been sitting on games. They do this all the time. So those games for me include the Zelda, Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker HD collection. I think that's our Zelda for the year. I think that comes out maybe late summer, early fall, maybe even November. But it's gonna be that will be the Zelda this year for Switch 2 and Switch. So that gives Switch a game, but it also gives Switch 2 a game. I'm sure there'll be visual enhancements for Switch 2. So that's going to be our Zelda game. I think the Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War remake that has been rumored for decades, it feels like, that's also going to come out. That gives Switch 2 Fire Emblem in its first year. That also gives Switch another game. The other big ones, Metroid Prime 2 and 3. The rumor is that these two are one bundle together because Prime 1 was just so much work. They made it its own kind of game. So I think that that is a shadow drop for February. If we do have a direct, I think it makes sense. And then really, I mean, Metroid Prime 4, obviously, Prime 2 and 3 have to come out before 4. And if you're asking me at this point, I get this gut feeling that Prime 4 is going to be May for some reason.
I
I
could see
I
that.
have a gut feeling because I know there's people that have said, "Oh no, Prime 4 is a launch title for the Switch 2." They're not going to launch it for Switch 2 title. Maybe this ages poorly and I'm just really not smart, but I would be really surprised if Nintendo dropped Prime 4 on the same day as Switch 2 and the new Mario Kart. What I do think they'll do though is I think it'll come out in May, and I think June will be Switch 2, and there will be like a day one patch that it runs 4K.
I can
But
see that.
maybe it releases later, but obviously that game will come to both Switch 1 and Switch 2. But I have a hard time thinking that's going to be a launch title. But so that's kind of the big games that I think that we will get this year. Kind of the Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD, the Fire Emblem remake, and then Metroid Prime 2 and 3. And then there's one more that's rumored, and that's Kirby Planet Robobot, kind of
Yes.
remaster. That's honestly, that'll come out whenever. Maybe it's a July game or something like that. But the key thing here is that those games will work on Switch 1 and Switch 2. And it kind of allows Nintendo to space out these big titles as we get into the first year of Switch 2's life cycle. So, in terms of Switch 2 games that will be exclusive to the Switch 2, I think obviously I want to be wrong on this, but I don't think we're getting Xenoblade 4 this year, considering we're getting Xenoblade X. However, I do think that game is coming out next year, hopefully. So I think they'll hold that. And I do think most of this stuff is going to get revealed in April. They're going to show stuff from all their studios. So for me, I think the big games that are coming this year, and I'll say, yeah, just for this calendar year, I think obviously 3D Mario, that's a given. That's the holiday game. So that's going to be the big one. Maybe it's October, but who knows? I think Luigi's Mansion 4 is something that might happen this year because, again, 15 million copies were sold of 3, and realistically, I don't know how you can pass that up if you're Nintendo.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I sit here like not exactly sure because there's just so much that they could pull from. And I think it's really going to be up to them on, what do we want to pull out as the big guns to get people to buy this console? And what are we wanting to say, okay, let's have a really big second year in 2026 and let's keep people on Switch 1 and Switch 2 engaged with these kind of, not double A titles, but kind of like, I would say medium hype titles, like
Right.
ports and remasters. But I think there'll be one more really big game. I am torn if I think Splatoon 4 or the new Animal Crossing is going to come out first, solely because we got Splatoon 3 in 2022.
Right.
But I think I could see one of those coming on. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo dropped, hey, here's Animal Crossing for Switch 2 in the first year. I mean, it sold so many millions of copies. I mean, you want people to get engaged on the platform early. That's a good way to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the key thing is going to be multiplayer support because Nintendo has been really good about supporting multiplayer, and they always really like to have multiplayer games on or near launch. And of course, since we're getting potentially Mario Kart at launch or near launch, that's already a big thing. But Splatoon 4 and Animal Crossing, yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's likely we'll probably get Animal Crossing first, and then we can. I think maybe early next year, I could see Animal Crossing coming out, and then Splatoon 4 either in like the summer or the fall, because that is usually a time where those games come out. Because yeah, it's been the last Splatoon was 2022, and the time between the original Splatoon and Splatoon 2 was just 2 years, and the time between 2 and 3 was 5 years. So here it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, they want that game. I can tell you, Nintendo wants that game on the Switch 2 as soon as possible. I just am not sure if they're going to do it year one. But to be honest with you, like I'm not going to be surprised by anything. I wouldn't be surprised
Yeah.
if Splatoon 4 is this year. But, you think about it's funny to say this, but I think about like the big mascots that they always use at the Nintendo Tokyo store as their like big franchises. And it's funny
Mm-hmm.
because, you've got Mario, Zelda, and then often they market Animal Crossing and Splatoon as like the
Yeah.
big four. So I really think like by December 2026, like, we'll get Splatoon and Animal Crossing on Switch too, but I'm really curious like what they end up doing because I agree with you. I think multiplayer support from the get-go is really important, and I know there's no way Splatoon 4 is going to be on Switch 1. So,
Oh no, no, not at all. But I think the big question I have is And this is kind of something that people have been talking about for a long time. So I'm curious to hear what you think. Do you think we are going to get a brand new Smash Brothers or a deluxe version with maybe new characters and new quality of life updates for Ultimate?
This is a really hard one because I want both.
Yeah.
But I think that Nintendo's going to go the new route. And
Mm,
I really wish that they would just sit down and just be like, okay, we're going to add 15 characters to Ultimate. We're going to retool it. We're going to add a bunch of maps, add a bunch of stuff, and we're going to be done. And basically do what they did for Mario Kart, right?
mm-hmm.
But knowing Sakurai, because you have to think, yes, Nintendo obviously has a hand in this, a big hand, but Sakurai's the creator, and you'll remember in his videos that whenever the last one aired, and he's like, hey, we're uploading this, and this was actually made 2 years ago. And he's talking about how he submitted his proposal for his next game, right? So I don't believe Sakurai wants to do deluxe. I don't think that's him.
Yeah.
I think that he is an innovator in the industry and one of the very few creatives that really pushes the medium forward with every release. So
Absolutely.
I believe that he wanted to take full advantage of the hardware and make an entirely new game, and we're going to get some sort of reset. And I have no idea how it's going to look. I mean, the thought of a reset scares me solely
Agreed.
because, you look at fighting games now. Now, Tekken 8, Harada listens. Thank you, Harada. We have a huge roster in that game. But I mean, I love Street Fighter 6. I mean, I just actually recently bought the Year 2 DLC for no reason at all. But I'm really disappointed still in the small size of that roster. And I know people will sit
Right.
here and disagree with me, but for me, the fun in a fighting game is having a huge list of characters to choose from. And, Capcom went the route of we have people who are really fine tooled and they're basically perfect characters in the way that they control. So they went for quality over quantity, but I just think that it's going to be a huge disappointment if we don't have like a big roster. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
I want like 40 characters minimum. And I don't know that we're going to get that with a remake. But yeah, to answer your question, I think that Nintendo and Sakurai are going to create a reboot of some sort. And I have no idea how it looks. And I'm so ready for all the prediction stuff to continue.
Agreed. Yeah, I am both admittedly excited and nervous at the prospect of a new Smash Brothers, especially because the hype cycle and release of Ultimate meant so much to me when it was coming out. I mean, I remember exactly where I was, how I was feeling when Joker was the first ever announced proper DLC character. I'm not counting Piranha Plant for Smash Brothers Ultimate. And then they only increased the stakes. I mean, we got Dragon Quest representation, we got Banjo Kazooie representation, King of Fighters, and so many others over the year. Like we got proper Final Fantasy VII representation.
Finally.
Finally, with music and everything, and kind of resetting that back to zero is admittedly a little bit alarming because how do you recapture that same excitement if you're essentially taking everything back to basic? How do you get people excited when potentially the characters that everyone fell in love with Ultimate? Because Smash Brothers is this huge franchise that represents the best of gaming as a concept because every single character appeals to someone, and people will pick up a character just because of how cool they look, and they will start getting into that franchise. I mean, I have several friends that tried Joker in Smash and got into Persona. And I have friends who got into Final Fantasy VII. I got into Final Fantasy VII because of Sephiroth in Smash Brothers. And I think resetting that is both, again, potentially really exciting because Sakurai is, as you said, an innovator, and clearly, if he is going to do something with the Smash Brothers franchise, it's going to be something worthwhile. But it's also scary because I mean, where do you go from Sora being the last character announced for Smash Bros. Ultimate? Like, if they ended the franchise right there and said, we are not making another Smash Bros. Ever again, personally, I'd be kind of okay with
I'd
that.
be
Like, if they
fine
just
with it.
continued, yeah, if they just continued to port the same characters, maybe added some visual updates, a map or here or two, and a character extra, like with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I'd be more than okay with it. You know, like throw in a Fire Emblem character, throw in a Mario RPG character, the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 representation, that sort of thing. But
I think we just need more Fire Emblem characters. We don't have enough.
agreed. Yeah, I think we have way too little Fire Emblem characters. I think we need
We need a
double. I
Leer.
think, yeah, yes, yeah. I hope that the new Smash Brothers, that Sakurai doesn't actually make a new Smash Brothers, just a new Fire Emblem fighting game. I think that'd be great. Um, Sorry, Nintendo fans, but yeah, I think Smash Brothers is going to be the key thing that everyone kind of thinks about going into the Switch 2 at the back of everyone's mind. Because at the beginning of this, we mentioned how Mario Kart is one of, if not Nintendo's biggest franchises, and one of the ones they absolutely have to get right. Smash Brothers is also on that list. Arguably, it's tied with Mario Kart because people buy consoles for Smash Brothers and Mario Kart. And I think it'll be interesting to see where that franchise goes next. Because for all we know, Sakurai could just be working on a new game and a new IP or an old IP. I mean, we could get something similar to Kid Icarus Uprising or a new Kirby game made by Sakurai or something else entirely. Who knows? But I think Nintendo would be foolish not to take into consideration the interest in a new Smash Brothers title.
Yeah, and for me, the reason that I think that we're guaranteed a new title and it's not going to be deluxe is the backwards compatibility aspect. Why would you
Yes,
release a deluxe edition if I can play Smash Ultimate with every DLC fighter right now on Switch 2? So
exactly.
that's the big one. And honestly, I mean, we had this when we went from GameCube to Wii, but I think it's even true more than ever now because, in my opinion, Switch was the best software lineup Nintendo's ever had. You're talking about some of the greatest games of all time that Nintendo's ever made and that have ever been in the industry, playable on the system from day one. And hey, guys, we're also making more in that franchise, and they're just going to coexist on the same system.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah, absolutely. But I think that there are so many places they can go with the series. I mean, in the perfect world, they would do what they did with Ultimate and pull a everyone is here and just keep adding to a roster of what, 85 characters at this point.
Yeah.
Um, and before you know it, we'll have another like Nintendo console in 10 years and we'll have Smash with like 150 characters. Um, or something like that. Every single major franchise is represented. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what Nintendo does. And I think that's just the takeaway for me in general from the Switch 2 is this sort of like the floodgates are open, so to speak. Because with Nintendo and especially the Switch, a lot of their time with the base Switch was sort of rebuilding their library from the Wii U. You know, we got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, we got the entire Xenoblade franchise, we had Mario 3D World, all the Mario, we got New Super Mario Bros. U, and quite a few others of games that were on the Wii U and made for the Wii U that were finally brought over to the Switch. So now, at this point, a lot of Wii U games are finally on the Switch. And so going into the Switch 2, the question is how will they take things to new heights? You know, we're not just going to get ports and HD versions of Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. We're probably going to get a brand new Donkey Kong game in general, maybe a new country game, maybe a new 3D platformer. And the question will be how where can they go from here? And I think if there's one thing that the last 20 years or so of being a Nintendo fan has taught me is that expect the unexpected. You know, I think that Nintendo is really going to wow us with their portfolio here, with franchises that everyone expects to franchises that people haven't seen in a long time. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll get a new Star Fox or new F Zero finally after years of waiting.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the big thing that people need to keep in mind, and we've talked about this, before the show and prior, to everything, but Nintendo Switch has so many different ports from Wii U because, again, like you said, no one played those games. So with Xenoblade X, like really, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker is the last big one that hasn't come over
Mm-hmm.
yet, and that's it. Like that whole library is on the Switch. It's going to be backwards compatible, so there's not going to be any porting. The only thing that you're going to see is we might see some remakes from the GameCube era or the 3DS or the DS era. But beyond that, like it's all going to be new games. And for me, what that kind of rings in my mind is we're probably going to see a lot more new IP from Nintendo this generation. And I think it's going to be about
Absolutely.
developing out these IPs that are growing so fast because of Switch. Like take Xenoblade before before Switch, I mean, Xenoblade on Wii and Xenoblade X combined to sell under I think 1.5 million copies, and on Switch alone, it sold almost 9 million. I mean, it's crazy. So I think that you're going to see all these series that really took off on Switch get massive new entries that are genre changing, game changing, and you're also going to see a lot of Nintendo's internal studios take on some new IP. Because really, with Nintendo for Nintendo Switch, the big new IPs we got, it was what or Star. Oh gosh, I'm getting confused. Arms, and
Yep.
what else?
1-2 switch.
Nah, they're Ring Fit Adventure. That's the
Oh
other one.
yes.
So Ring Fit Adventure and Arms were the two big new IPs we got from Nintendo for Switch, realistically. I mean, there were a couple other smaller ones, but those were the big ones. And, I would like to see Arms 2. Will it happen? I have no idea. I mean, I had a good time with that game, personally, beyond the point. But yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see a lot more innovation in the software. And I think having once again, back to what we said at the beginning, having a system that isn't necessarily an entire new platform that you have to build everything out for is so huge for these developers because at the end of the day, they can focus on innovating with the software and not the hardware. And I think that's going to be so critical. And that's why it's so crazy, once again, that people are judging this thing. Like, if you want to talk crap on it, wait till April 2nd. After April 2nd, if you're unsatisfied, that's completely fine. I have no complaints with that. But however, today it's ridiculous to be talking bad about the Switch 2. And I'm not sitting here trying to be a Nintendo defender or anything else. I'm not on the Metroid Federation Force list, all right?
Oh
But
my god.
I'm telling you, like you got to let them show what this system does and what it's capable of because we know nothing. And I think that's just the summary of this video. We know nothing, and that's an exciting time to be in for Nintendo.
Yeah. But on the subject of we know nothing, I think the big ultimate question that everyone has on their mind, if we're talking about predicting what is going to happen with the Nintendo Switch 2, there are two questions that everyone is asking. When is it going to come out? How much is it going to cost? What's your take?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So I believe that Nintendo doesn't like Jeff Keighley. No, I'm kidding. I really wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo dropped the Switch 2 on the day of Summer Game Fest, like June 7th, or I don't know when
Yeah.
it is this year, but like the first Friday of June. I really wouldn't be surprised. Um, they like the beginning of the month for console releases. I don't think it's going to be May. It could be, and I might be super wrong. Hey, that's totally fine, but that's what we're here for is to predict. I think it's going to launch early June for $399. It will not be a cent more than $399. People making fake leaks saying it's 500 or through 450 or lying. There's not going to be an OLED, which I have grievances about, but that's fine. This console is going to be $399 out the first week of June. I don't see it for a penny more or a penny less. They're going to charge 400.
Agreed. I completely agree with everything that you just said because I was thinking about, Nintendo's previous track record. Because Nintendo is both simultaneously completely unpredictable and also very predictable. Um, I looked back at their consoles, and for the most part, a lot of their consoles have been in the range of that $300 price point. Um, and like between 300 and 400. Usually it's 300 or 350. And I don't see it going above 400, especially if the Nintendo Switch 1 is going to stick around for a while, because that just makes sense. Because we got the basic Nintendo Switch model, $300. We've got the Lite, which is, I believe, 250 at this
It's
point.
199.
199, perfect. Um, and we've got the OLED that's 350, and the Switch 2 that would be 400. And in terms of release date, I mean, yeah, I think June's a good bet because with the original Switch, we have to take into consideration they announced it in October, 3 months later in January, we got the showcase, and 2 months later, it launched in March. In this case, announced in January, 3 months later, we've got a showcase in April, 2 months later, launch in June. I think that makes sense, and I think that gives them an opportunity to really capitalize on the fiscal year and a summer, like a big summer library, and then of course a huge winter like onslaught of games, which is usually what they've done in the past. And I think that'll work for them. I think June is a very smart bet. I may be biased because that is when my birthday is. Um, but I think that, yeah, I think June and $400 is a very safe bet. And I, for one, am already setting aside money just in case.
Yeah, I will say though, on your comment about like Switch One sticking around, I totally agree, but I think you're not taking into consideration that they're probably going to cut the price. So
True.
I think that they're going to cut the price of Switch One to $200,
Yeah.
and they're going to just have Switch One available for $200. Maybe the light goes down to like 99 or 120, and you're going to have an entry level floor for people, which again is a key reason why Nintendo's going to keep releasing games on Switch at least for 18 to 24 months. So I think you're going to get, these remasters and ports that they've been sitting on. This is going to be like what the Switch One people are going to be enjoying. I Switch One people, just Switch One owners are going to be enjoying, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean, hey, if that's your boat, take it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want to play those games too. I'll just be playing them at nice 1080p. I mean,
Yes, please.
but I think that's about going to do it for episode 1 of Switch Point. And thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this inaugural episode. But of course, I know the name is Switch Point. We'll be covering all things Nintendo from the beginning with the SNES to the future beyond Switch 2. So if you're looking for more and excited about Nintendo and what's next for them, be sure to stick around, hit that subscribe button, and let us know down in the comments what you'd like us to discuss for the next episode. We'll catch you next time.